Disney World and Epcot, where people will go to Epcot and they go to Paris and they go, but it doesn't look anything like it. And then the city labyrinth,
I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the November 17th, 2025 study session of your Ashland City Council. We have two agenda items this evening. The first is a review of code changes that will be coming towards the council, and the second is an update on the camping ordinance. So, Sabrina?
Yeah, so tonight the city attorney is going to walk us through suggestions for some code changes. This is our first pass at this. We will have more at a later date as we're reviewing all of the code. It does say in your agenda item that we don't need direction, but you can give it. So just to clarify that, we're here to take your feedback. So with that, I will turn it over to Johan.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can I have the screen for the PowerPoint? So yeah, like the city manager said, this is part of a all city effort, all department effort to kind of clean up areas of the code. Some of this is just removing things that are inaccurate, modernizing some sections, and then reflecting current standards and practices. We can provide at this time, this would be a good time if council has suggestion as for feedback as to specific language. This would be a good time to kind of discuss that. Council could choose to take no action, or council can provide direction to bring this back for first reading. So anything we discuss here today will have to be brought back for a first reading and then eventually a second reading. So we have lots of opportunity to dive into the nitty gritty of the language, but just something to keep in mind.
Johan, as we get started, I just wanted to go over what the process is going to look like for tonight. There's a number of things on this list. There's a bunch of them, and we want to make sure that we get through them as best we can. So what we're looking for is top level guidance back to staff. So we'll go through one by one, and if you have an issue with that particular one, that's the time to say it, and we'll address it. And if there's council feedback, we'll provide it, and then we'll move on to the next one. But you'll understand that we need to keep a pretty decent clip.
Yeah, and I'll try and not speed it up too much with the way I talk. But I did, for an ease on that note, I did break it up, or with the help of the deputy city attorney and the deputy city manager, we broke it up into 3 sections. The first section is areas of the code that should just be basically removed, either because they're redundant within the code itself, outdated, or no longer used. That's table 1. There's also table 2, which has minor changes, either reverting back to an ORS citation or fixing updates and sites, that sort of thing. And then table 3, I did break each code suggested change into each individual slide, so we're going to discuss that in detail. Those are more substantive changes. And that'll kind of make more sense as we go through this here. Yeah, let's get into it. Yep, as we said, this is just the opportunity to get the discussion going. We're going to move through it kind of quickly and see if council is interested in bringing these things forward for a first reading. So getting into the first, oh, that's so nice and small. All of these are provided in your packet and broken into the tables as well. And then this slideshow is actually no new information, but just kind of breaking down each of the tables. So in the first table, we start with 2.04050M, and that's order of business. Looking to strike the language M1. This is redundant language. It's in Article 10 of the charter. So it's essentially just referenced in 2 places, talking about the order, resolutions, contracts, and other business. So we're recommending striking that just to clarify it's all done in the charter anyway. Moving on to 04090, removing the list of commissions, boards, because that language is also spelled out in the remainder of Chapter 2, 2.11, 2.12, and 2.13. It breaks down all the committees. So essentially we list them, and then we go through and list them all again. Just kind of, again, general cleanup. Regular membership removal process. It's 0.090F. There's a typo in there. It says any member of the Recreation Committee or Planning Commission is not subject to these. It's actually the Parks Commission. They're elected. It's a different body. That was just a typo that we caught, so it's a good time to fix it. 2.08 has to do with the city recorder, but this is now an appointed position rather than elected. So the duties fall under 2.28, the administrative process, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. We recommend essentially moving it from that section into the administrative duties. So moving on to the latter part of Table 1, public art definitions, subsection P is a word-for-word repeat of subsection F. So for some reason, they put that in there twice under two different definitions. It's commercial development fee. It's just in there under P and also another F. So we're recommending striking section P. General policies and employee responsibilities. We're recommending this chapter get removed. This is all of our HR policies, but essentially for some reason they're put into code. And obviously in our situation, the city manager is responsible for personnel issues, and also really kind of creates a weird situation where an employee could be brought before council for like a fine for violating a HR policy, which I don't think really fits our system of government.
Johan, it seems like that's just a standard element of the cleanup from the change in form of government, but it seems like it would have been a strange thing to have even before.
I agree.
Okay.
There's quite a few of those where it's like, why do we have this in here?
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, if I could. So I have a big issue with the idea of completely deleting 3.08. So 3.08 actually, I don't disagree. There's some things in here that are completely outdated and certainly fall within management's authority. But I mean, we also have things in here like code of ethics that govern even us and Parks and Recreation Commission. And so I certainly think that it would be a massive mistake and also against the city charter to just completely delete that chapter. I'd certainly be open to revisions and modernization, but it's pretty clear in the charter that actually the council does retain authority to have some sort of structure and guidelines around personnel policies, broadly speaking. Obviously, city manager drafts those policies, but they are subject to council confirmation. And when appropriate, I'm happy to go over the relevant parts of the charter that clearly state that.
Okay. So in just a second, I'll get to like an overview of the first table. So 6.32030, we can actually kind of strike this one because it's on for first reading tomorrow. We were kind of putting this together at the same time as the city recorder was working on additional code updates. So that'll be on first reading tomorrow regarding the OLCC application, or the whole OLCC permit process. And then 6.42030 through 050, back in 2022, the state started requiring their own tobacco retail license. And so we're essentially removing the city's need for a local license. I don't believe we track that anymore because it's that we still have. Yeah. So just something that's no longer done. The state kind of regulates all of that. As far as table 1 goes, these are the recommendations we're making. It sounds like on 3.08, Councilor Bloom would like to see it not completely deleted, but modified potentially to reflect more of an ethics outline for those who aren't just, I guess we'll call them frontline employees, or what's the?
Yeah.
So before we dive into that, are there any other concerns with anything on this list? I just want to have a sense of what we're lining up.
So, I'll preface anything that I say relative to this agenda item is, I don't know if I'm ready to have a full comprehensive discussion, other than I would like to press pause on certain things just to have more time and information to think through things. So the only other one, and I generally agree with you on the 2.08 about the recorder. Mm-hmm. I personally need to think that one through just a little bit more, because the recorder still is in the charter, and I know the chief of police is too, but that one is one I would probably not say yes to tonight if it weren't up or down, even though I get where you're going with it.
Okay.
So that's actually a bigger question, which is that we haven't gone back through the charter necessarily and made all of even the corrections from changing the form of government. And so the order that we look at these, it seems that for now, any changes that we make need to still comply with the charter, which is not, there's conflicting language in the charter between the city manager, council form of government, and some of the other charter provisions, right? So how do we navigate that?
And that's the tricky part. And and we could pull things out if they do conflict with the charter, but that's the tricky thing, is that all the charter changes will have to go to the voters.
Right.
So we can highlight those things and kind of come up with, obviously we don't want to overwhelm the citizens of Ashland to say, here are 9 charter changes we see, but we could, work at like the upcoming elections and say, what are our priority changes that we need to see? What are clearly just no longer, relevant, and kind of create a list, and then maybe, do 1 or 2 in an election cycle.
Cycles or something like that. Okay, so we have 2 items off of this list that we want to discuss in more detail.
Okay.
And did you have anything else to line us up on this section, Johan?
No, not on section 1, but to your point, Councilor Dale, we aren't removing the city recorder, we're just moving the duties into 2.28 would be the idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I completely agree with you. That doesn't bother me. I mean, that would be a follow-up question would be, are you just taking and like forklifting the exact language over just to be cleanup? And that's fine if you are, but to the mayor's point that I think that we should still have, especially with these charter ambiguities or the disconnects, that we have that fulsome discussion, that we talk about a charter. And so I guess my question back to you would be, and again, this is not a hill I want to die on here on this particular one, but would it hurt anything just leaving it at 2.08 administratively? Does it cause any inefficiencies to you, to legal, to admin, if we just said, well, wait a second, that can hang for just a second until we have the charter and maybe more code discussion? I'm just asking. It's not, again, something that I think is too big a deal, but.
Yeah, on that particular one, I can't think of a conflict that comes up.
It's just inaccurate duty descriptions.
Yeah, I guess that it's just inaccurate descriptions to some of her duties and some of her, I shouldn't say her, the duties described in the charter.
And that it would come back for a first reading, and we can have certainly a deeper conversation about that. So if there's no issue
If that would
with
be the
that,
time that.
that would be the
want
time
to,
for a deeper.
At first reading?
Yeah.
Would it be okay? Okay.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, just before this gets away from us, I'd like to submit some documents to the public record. If the city recorder could hand them out to councilors, and then obviously it's available to the public as well. I feel like now's the best time to just get that out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, the alligator is a group. The individual staples are separate. Try to organize.
So these are all separate, each of them is a separate document. Okay, so let's start them at that. Yeah, let's all start them with Councilor Hanson, and then we can just hand them down. Yeah, pass them, take one and pass them down.
There's 10, so we need copies too.
Okay, I'll come down here and wait for that.
Can I have a copy too?
There's 10. Oh, no, I'm sorry, yeah, 6. Yeah, 10 copies each. It gets confusing. Imagine me at Pronto Print this morning.
Yes.
Yes, please, that's smart.
5?
5 or 6? That's 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi. I need copies.
Okay, I think we're all good. Everybody's got 5.
Johan needs.
There should be one more. I don't want it. Yeah, that's it.
All right, so since we're at set 1, we're going to start with 3.08. Counselor Bloom?
Yeah, so kind of going through here, and I can walk you all through. You all have a copy of 2 points. I think first the best is to start with really why we shouldn't be just repealing 3.08. So the city charter is pretty clear that yes, the city manager supervises employees. Charter Article 8A, Section 4.4, all personnel policy belongs exclusively to the city manager. But that is not legally supported. There's 2 distinct categories exist under the charter, and that's governance level personnel policy, which is council authority. That's governed under Article 8, Section 1, which vests all powers of the city in the council unless expressly stated otherwise. Nothing in the charter removes personnel policy from the council anywhere, including Article 8A. Now, the city manager, of course, hiring, supervising, daily discipline, evaluation, workplace management, implementation of personnel rules exists, and that's pretty clear in Article 8A, Section 4. But deleting 3.08 essentially completely gets rid of any kind of council oversight authority over establishing what that system can look like. So in terms of what our expectations are in terms of reporting, making sure that code of ethics are followed, making sure that there is some sense or form of whistleblower protections, council would essentially be giving up all authority over that. And I think it's incumbent on us and future councils that we make sure that there is some kind of oversight mechanism in place as the city manager proposes their personnel rules. And so you can see, and obviously I don't want to spend all night on this, and I don't think that we're going to get to some final conclusion on 3.08. I would just hope that we would pause any discussion of deletion for the time being. I also included an idea to kind of help guide us on what a new 3.08 would look like. So that way it is broad, it doesn't get into the kind of micromanaging of HR and when does a pay raise come into place? That's certainly not our lane. And I certainly understand why it would come up that we need to maybe look at 3.08, but there are elements that need to stay in there. Now, in terms of it still leaves out, the personnel policy and what kind of guides that process and what are those guidelines and what does that look like. I think that should just be a separate structure that follows the 2.28, which governs the city manager and departments and all of that. I think that would be a good place for that. And of course, the mechanism of which, I've got some ideas we can get into, not something that we need to belabor tonight. But I would just hope that council would read through my arguments here. I think they're legally sound. And like I said, I poured over every single part of this chapter and every single element of the city charter. And it is very clear that, yes, we do retain that authority, that we cannot allow a situation where any kind of policy, any idea, any kind of, whistleblower issues can just kind of happen in a back room, and there's no process, there's no clear guidance in the code that says what that is. And so that's my hope for at least tonight for that issue, is that we just put a pause on it, consider my arguments, consider some of my proposals for what a new 3.08 would look like, and what I put as 2.29 is what my proposal would be for a new personnel system. And the reason why it says 2.29, when obviously we're looking here and that talks about public art, is it just seems like that public art probably should fall under 2.13, which is committees and commissions, and that would free up 2.29, which would be a nice, clean place to put personnel policies. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So we're not going to dig into this tonight at that level. The question before council is, would we like to pause and give Johan a chance to review this information and take this up at a future study session, or do we want the staff to come forward with draft ordinance language? Let's just go around. We can start anywhere. Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you,
Which
Mayor.
of those two options, which of those two options?
Thank you for the options. I would like to pause and so that we could take a better look at this. I appreciate Councilor Bloom's efforts in bringing this in-depth information to our attention, so I'm in support of pausing. Thank you.
Councilor Hansen?
Yeah, this is all new to me. I think a pause is in order. Overall, I think we're
doing the good work here, and I appreciate staff and Johan coming forward and Councilor Bloom's work here. The more we can do on this, the better. I'm actually surprised that the list is not as long as I thought it was going to be. So really how much is going to get worked and stricken is still something I'm hoping to learn more in this study session. But in general, I think we're going the right direction, and I appreciate the work here. I just would like to get legal's opinion on it and sit with it for now.
Councillor Sherrill?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm continuing to look forward to what staff is going to bring, and I look forward to the next 2 sections, but I think it sounds like at least a few of us so far that have spoken are in agreement that it's going to be a slow process, but I look forward to seeing some of these changes and some of these cleanups. I think it's probably long overdue.
And so specifically about 3.08, would you like to see that in a deeper study session conversation? Great.
I would as well.
Okay, and Councillor Kaplan.
Yes, I'd like to see a deeper study session as well. But I just wanted to ask a question about the process here. I mean, it seems to me we've got a lot of information here, and I appreciate Councilor Bloom's work here. Of course, we're not going to discuss it here today because we've only just received it. But it strikes me that there's just a deeper process, and I'm very mindful of what happened to this council a year or so ago when we spent 3 or 4 or 5 sessions talking about one title in the code about committees and commissions, and I just do not want to get into that again. It seems to me there needs to be a smaller group that can kind of look through this with the city attorney, do it in public session or something, but that it's not part of the council's. Not that we don't bring it to this council until it's ready for prime time, because otherwise we just chew up an enormous amount of time, and I'm not supportive of that.
Councillor Duquesne?
Thank you. Something that was brought up earlier by legal, and it was brought up the fact that there are things that we need to still go through, and perhaps we could bring them because charter change has to go to the vote. And I understand this is going to be a slow roll. And the work that was put in here, and then we see it and it's removed entirely, and we're like, no, we don't want to remove it entirely. I am 100% supportive before staff does this and makes a decision to pull something that you don't get input from others that can maybe do the work ahead of time, bring the opinion and the thought, so that it's not like, yeah, let's just pull it off. Some things are redundant, some things are typo, and some things are needed. So even before we take a deep dive into the charter changes that need to go to the voters, I believe we need to have other eyes on this, so that if it's a couple of us and a couple of staff or whatever it looks like, so that it's solid and we are not going back and forth and spending so much valuable council time and not really moving at a good pace and taking care of the business we need to do for the people now that we have a city manager and our mayor. So I'm in support of bringing outside meaning a couple of counselors, staff, whomever, to look at charter changes and bring it forward, and then we move it forward because time is valuable.
Go ahead, Johan.
Okay, I'm going to try and respond to everything in one concise way, because there's a lot of stuff being said there. So one thing council could do, if it was the desire of the whole body here, is to, on this one here, on 3.08, is to request that come back in the next group of this that we do as a part of Table 3, where we go through more in depth, as we'll do later at the end of this, suggested changes, and bring it back with a little bit more dissection. You'll get it in advance of that meeting. We can include this, Councilor Bloom's arguments with it in the next, whenever we set that. I think it's set in February right now.
Councillor Bloom?
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate Councillor Kaplan's suggestion. I think a working group would be really helpful. 3 councillors, city attorney, deputy city attorney obviously makes sense to kind of really work through some of these. For me, the red flag ones are Title 1, 2, and 3. I think those are kind of the meat of what is our structure, ordinance, how are those enacted, so process. 2 deals with council administration. Very much, I think council has a huge stake in that. 3, obviously talking about personnel, that kind of ties into 2 really a bit. I think that some of 3 really should just be in 2. But beyond that, I mean, 4, we could talk about financial policies, and there's definitely some issues there. As I spoke earlier with Councilor Kaplan today, there's references to Title 18.100, which just does not exist anymore. But a lot of that, like Title 6 and on, I mean, we're talking about, I don't think are very controversial things. So I think if we did a working group, it should really be focused on Titles 1 through 3. We really get into the nitty gritty. So anything in Table 1, 2, and 3 that relate to those 3 titles, I think should be reserved for a working group to really flesh out and make sure that when it comes forward to council, we can be really productive in our conversations moving forward.
Councilor Dale?
Yeah, I don't think I can agree more emphatically with Councilor Kaplan's suggestion. I too do not want to spend any time at this body doing that. And Johan, I really appreciate all the work that's put in, but just to your most recent comment, if I heard you correctly, I still think, and maybe I'm wrong, that might be missing the point. Or aside to, like, I just think that bringing something back to, round 2 still doesn't give us the in-depth discussion that needs to happen as part of a working group, because otherwise we're just going to do, I know it, we're just going to do the same thing the next round. That's what I worry about. So I am all for having the working group, and if there is a pause, one idea would be it'd be remanded to this group to work with you.
So one way forward is for us to keep going through this list tonight, to identify the issues that are not where we have some concern and some question, and then that body is the body that Johan would then reach out and say, who's interested in having a conversation? The first 3 people to stay under the quorum rules who raise their hand get to be on the committee that digs into this, and rather than being a formal committee, it would just be a working group to hopefully get us further down the road, so that when it comes back in front of us, we're not spending meetings and meetings and meetings on it. If that sounds appropriate, then that's the first one that we set aside, 308, would go on that list. Does that seem right? Is that right? Okay, all right, so we have moved through everything on this list.
Okay, so as far as the other items on Table 1, does council want to provide direction as to bringing the rest of those for first reading?
I think, Councilor Dale, you were concerned about 2.08, so should we put that one on the list as well?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so everything but 2.08 and 3.08 from this list is a go. All right.
All right, so we're moving into Table 2. Again, this is some language changes to provide more clarity, bring our local code to an alignment with current...
Johan, your mic.
Sorry. Bring our local code into alignment with current statutes, references, and/or modern practices. 2.04020, this is to sections A, B, C, D, and E. As the state, changes their regulations, additional changes to the AMC are required. This change would essentially just cite to the state statute. In doing so, it would make one substantive change, though, as to the 72-hour notice for regular meetings. It would become 48, and then it would become 24 hours for a notice for a special meeting. This kind of ties into the section below, Section F, which references the state statute instead of what it currently says, which is a newspaper with a general local circulation. We don't really have that anymore. And the state regulation, I can't remember exactly how it reads off the top of my head now, but it's, yeah.
They just leave it.
Oh, I have a microphone? I do.
Yeah, to chime in for that part, the ORS is just very general. It's something to the effect of like anything that would put the public at notice.
We need you into a mic. There you go.
Okay, for the ORS, it's very general. It's something to the effect of whatever would put the public on notice.
It's kind of my reading on these things that this was put together before the level of internet access we have now. And, the ability to do that.
Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, I definitely think that we need to update some of this here. The only issue I have is that there's implications that come with that, right? Like, I mean, I think 48 hours is not, especially considering obviously the internet and stuff. The problem though that I have is that we have nothing in the code currently that states when agenda packets are supposed to come to council. And so by moving this notice, but then not having anything put into 2.04 that states that we get packets, technically, I don't think that it would happen now, but it certainly could happen in the future, is that councils could end up getting their packets 48 hours in advance, which is no time. So I think this is a perfect example of that working group where let's go in and make sure that whatever we're removing, so like if we're moving this to 48 hours, we're putting something in place to make sure that agenda packets are going out at a reasonable time. And it speaks to, the documents that I put out earlier. So that's just one that I'm kind of flagging as I think it's a good idea, but until we bake in some protections in there, we should pause on that.
Okay. This is more, just for clarification, this is more for notice to the public. So there is a resolution that deals with when agenda packets go out, and we cite to it all the time when we do our council training. So this doesn't really, in my opinion, in my reading of it, doesn't really affect the agenda packets. Like, this is more for notice for the public.
Yeah, I totally take that point, but as was brought up to me earlier today, and it is a point well taken, is that resolutions are not always easy to find and they're easy to change. And I think it's helpful that we bake in some protections for council and future councils, that we can expect an agenda at a certain time, and that's just something included. So I'm happy to support this kind of a change, but I think, again, this is something better suited for that working group to kind of make sure that when we introduce something for 2.04, it's got multiple components to it, and that way we're not piecemealing these individual pieces and having several meetings over it.
Councilor Duquesne?
Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up. When I read this, and you mentioned, Johan, that it's pretty much for the public and the packet is the packet, but I think the public also has the right to have access to this ahead of time, because sometimes the packet can have, it's a small book or a large book, depending. So I think that the public should have the ability to have access to this and proper timing also. So I believe that we should take 2.04 and add that to what this work group would discuss also. And I'm hoping that members of the community would be in this work group too, and they could put their comments down.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree as well, and I think to your point about it being in resolution, I also think there's a bunch of 2.04 within the meetings that have a bunch of dates and times that I think if we're going to clean it up, let's clean it up. And I think that means making sure all the pieces fit together with that. So I'm with pulling that as well. Other than that, I'm good with the entire list.
So, go ahead.
Question just for
Johan.
point of clarification, because the next one is subsection .030E of 2.04, so it is the same chapter, but that just clarifies, instead of people's address, they just say their city of residence, which is our practice anyway. I'm assuming that's not included in what?
So we can back this up. So all of this discussion has been around 2.04.020. That seems to be where the issue is. We haven't made our way all the way down the rest of the packet yet. So at this point, if by nod of heads, if we think that 2.04.020 is something that we should add to this list, head nod, if that looks right. Should we add this to the list? Okay, we will add that to the list, and then we'll keep going, and then we'll see if there's any objections to any of the other items.
Okay, so like you just said, .030E is just altering it from address to city of residence. That's the common practice in land use proceedings for non-land use proceeding public testimony. That's, I believe, what we've done, at least since I've been here. We don't ask for their address, but for this section 2.28 is where I was referring to moving the city recorder duties, it does look like in the charter, it, it talks a lot about the city recorder, but it's all administrative, so we would just essentially move the administrative duties of the city recorder into that section, would be kind of the reference from earlier.
Counselor Dale?
I think that's contingent on what we talked about, but I would agree.
Right, so it would stay in the working group, but this is where it would be heading. Okay, Counselor Bloom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, I mean, this is a good change. It should happen. I think the point I'm trying to make is that what I don't want to have happen, or I would like to see us avoid, is that we say, for example, 2.04.030E. Yes, obviously, that's a really good change. But I would hate for you to put in the work, you draft an ordinance, you come forward, we approve that, and then we go back as a working group, and then we make more changes to 2.04, and then we come back. What I'm trying to do is, like, how do we streamline and make sure we're as productive as possible? And so for me, anything in 2.04 should just automatically be for that working group, so that when we bring an ordinance back, it's one ordinance with all the changes, 2 votes, because 2 readings, and then we move forward. Just specifically about 2.04.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we'll have to look practically. It's probably going to be more than one ordinance.
In order to read, you can't just delete this 2.04 strike.
I mean, as the whole chapter or whole
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
So those are good. It's going to be lengthy, but we could. I mean,
But as we're doing here, you just read by title. We don't need to read the whole thing into the record.
yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to expediency and not have to have 5 ordinance readings of different components.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do see a lot of ordinance readings in our future, but they're fun. They're good to add too.
Okay.
Yeah, are there any concerns specifically on the council from 2.04.020 and 2.04.030E? Are there any concerns with those? Because if they're not, then we could leave it to staff, I think, to decide when to bring it forward.
I
haven't heard any concerns. I know, I just heard that Councilor Bloom wants to pull it all together in one. That's what I'm checking the council. Does if nobody has a problem with those other 2, then we can leave it to staff discretion about whether to pull them together with, in the working group or not. Councilor Kaplan?
Yeah, you included 2.04.020, where there's 2 references to that. The first 2 ones, we've already talked about the 72 hours notice. There's a second reference to it. So, I mean, it seems to me that if we're going to defer the 2,
2 point, yeah, it'll be it's either the first 2 or we add the third one. I don't want us to get into a big process around that. If there are no objections to 030E, then we'll move on. And I'm not seeing objections to 040 or 030E. Okay, all right, let's keep moving.
Okay, and so we talked about 2.28. We're going to put that into the work group with, I think it was 2.08. So 2.29 020G, it's just replacing the word commission with committee in all the references, because that's what we now use. So might as well keep it consistent.
Councilor Bloom?
Actual question.
Yeah.
Has there been any consideration of moving 2.29 public art into 2.13 with committees and commissions, given that a lot of it's there? Couldn't we fit that neatly in and free up that chapter?
It's a good question for the city recorder. So like a renumbering, basically?
I mean, that just seems like the cleanest way, because then you could basically come back with these changes all just now in a new chapter that fits cleanly in with committees and commissions, which is largely what the whole public art 2.29 talks about.
Yeah. So combining those 2, basically.
Yeah. And then implementing the changes that you list out here.
Yeah, I think that's very doable.
Any concerns with that process? Okay.
So it'll be one ordinance essentially covering those changes and combining everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the existing advisory committee ordinance.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Sorry, I'm going to make notes as we go. Okay. Great. Moving along here. Let's see. We're getting into public art definitions, and this is from who provided this one? From Brandon Goldman. His suggestion was just for clarification, defining public art on property owned or property controlled by the city, and then included within public rights of way. I believe that the clarification, yeah, it's just cleaning up the language, basically. But
Counselor Kaplan?
Yeah, I think I'd be in favor of just everything that's 2.29, just moving that all the way over and not even talking about it tonight. Let's just take
Okay.
that up when we take that.
Okay.
They're all, I think you're right, they're all minor changes, and I don't know that we need to take time discussing those here.
Okay.
Yeah. Any
Sounds good.
concerns about that? Okay, move along.
Okay, 2.54070, we're including electronic payments. Pretty self-explanatory as a form of payment that most people use these days. 6.04120, a lot of these changes coming up here, they're all listed in the miscellaneous fees and charges that you guys just approved. So now they're listed in two places. So to your point, we're not bringing it twice each time that a fee has to change. It's all listed in the book. So the idea would just be reference the miscellaneous fees book. And that's for both 6.04120 and 14.12020. It's referencing the fees schedule. Questions on
Okay, if
that?
there are no concerns, we'll move on.
Did that change? Electric system? Yeah. So on this first one, 14.12050D, the agency basically changed names. It's no longer the Federal Power Commission. It's now the Federal Energy Regulation Commission. So it's just a, yep, exactly. 14.12060. Again, this is combining it with the miscellaneous fees. It's already listed in there. 14.12080, it's correcting the ORS. In this case, I think the ORS actually changed. We didn't cite it incorrectly, but the ORS changed. And then 14.16020, it's just citing to the chapter of the ORS. So that way we don't have to update, I guess, the energy rules change all the time. And that way we're just following the state law, whatever it is, and not having to go back through and change all our ordinances. So those are those changes here.
I just, a point of clarification. So the public art sections that we're talking about are about art acquisition, not so much the administration of the public art committee. So are you looking to have the city's process for art acquisition listed with the committee?
Counselor Bloom?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it couldn't just be a subsection within that.
Thank you. Well, I think what you're potentially looking at is that the Public Art Advisory Commission doesn't purchase art. The council does. And so some of those rules are rules for council's management of the public arts system. So there may be, I think maybe what we say is take a look at that. Anything related to how the commission operates should be with the commission in that particular ordinance, it would seem. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. And then anything to do with the council's management of public art and selection and purchase and that sort of thing would stay in its own place.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
And there's free chapters in Title II that could then separately be slotted into.
And there are some definition changes that I think could apply maybe to both, but yeah, I take your point.
Yeah, take it and figure out what makes the most sense. Councilor Dale?
Oh, no, I was going to say, yeah, I think on further review, I agree that probably should not be slotted under committees. It's its own thing. So appreciate Sabrina for pointing that out.
That sound reasonable to folks? Yeah? Okay. Any issues with any of what you see here? Anything that needs to be talked about more? Okay?
Yeah, let's just review. We already covered that. All right, table 3. So this is where we get into more substantive things. Each slide is going to be dedicated to a proposed change. Anything we discuss here obviously will be brought forth for first reading, so we don't need to hammer out all the language, or just do you want to see changes consistent with the reasoning? Obviously 2.04, we're not going to dive into too much because we're going to let you guys develop a work group and that'll be a part of that. One of the proposed changes, just to think about, is the responsibility for the agenda and the ability to change the order. The work group discussed that. I believe the reason was sometimes there are items on which we know are going to take a long time, and so it might be good, like for a public hearing, to move that to the first thing and get it done before special presentations, allow the public to comment on it, and so we're not up to against that bench. But again, just things to be thinking about. Just send notes to the whoever's going to be in charge of this committee or myself. Go that way.
Counselor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question. On here, it says, reason for change. City manager is responsible for preparation of council agenda. And I thought it was the city manager and the mayor.
It's the city manager. We do it in consultation, but it's the city manager is the final eyes and decisions on what gets put in the agenda.
Thank you for that clarity.
Counselor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really good one. Again, it's a 2.04 issue. It's directly, absolutely under the charter, falls in line of our powers. So I think that this is something that's best suited for that working group. I mean, just broadly speaking, I think that the city manager shall prepare the agenda in consultation with the mayor and council leadership. I think that it should be a collaborative process, and ensuring that our democracy is maintained by having the democratic leaders of the city be involved heavily in that process. But again, that's the specific. I think broadly, I think this is really something that we need to debate and knuckle out about what makes sense in a working group rather than just kind of like, okay, or trying to debate this here tonight.
Makes sense.
Thoughts?
Makes sense.
I can send it to the working group, or I
I
need
think
nods
this is already
if that's
going
what
to
you
the
want.
working group, the 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the same with this one here. Something to mull over again, though. If we want to toy around with the requirements for having the public hearings with a hard stop or hard start time. We've had issues, but something to be thinking about, your perspective on it. I understand, and the mayor and I have talked about this, the purpose behind it is to allow people from the public not have to stay here until 9:30 to get their opportunity to speak on an issue. Or we move it until 10 p.m. and that's when, no. So just something to be thinking about, opportunities for flexibility. Again, this is a public arts one. This is process for acquiring public art. So this would be, I guess, in that second section, not necessarily in the committee's section, but Director Goldman had brought this forward to essentially clarify and reflect the standard operating procedures that they use for acquiring public art. And the changes you see on here, I should note, the remaining portion of the edits that are included in the table, we're just striking the remainder of it, which had to do with an ad or a postcard, just 'cause it's really expensive to do that, and we have the internet and ability to communicate with people that way.
Counselor Duquesne.
Thank you. Like, look at me.
Yeah.
So if I heard you correctly, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this, because I'm the liaison for public arts, and they have been wanting to be forward-facing with all information about the art. And on here, it says an ad in the newspaper, and we do have 21st century digital age. So everything will be digital, going to our digital newspapers, our social media. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that's one of the changes. The other change that's more substantive is not a requirement, switching it to may for the art professionals and enthusiasts, because it's my understanding that they've had difficulty finding people who want to do that and fit the requirements.
Exactly.
So obviously, it's an encouragement, but if we can't find anyone to fill the committee, we need a permissible, person on it.
And we would get these individuals via social media and, okay.
Digital outreach.
All right. Thank you, because I saw that you had that, Johan, and I agree. You know, some things can be costly, but we have an ad that's pretty much in the sneak preview. We have digital, so I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that.
Yeah, sneak preview is a great example, but you know, at 50 cents a postcard or whatever it is now, it's like,
Yeah, that's why I'm all
it's
for
costly.
digital. Yeah, let's do digital.
Yeah.
And that's where people go, so I appreciate that.
So this will be on the list for the working group unless unless the council decides that it doesn't need to see it there. Okay, go ahead.
okay. Another public art kind of correction here. So, and I just found this out, but essentially it's clarifying that if it's public art, meaning that it's public facing, it clarifies the definition so that private art on private property, the city is not going to be responsible for upkeep, and which technically is how our code reads now. So we're not going to go onto people's private property and help, you know, trim the hedges around their installation. But just good to clarify that, so we're not, you know, it's not held to that. Let's see here. Disposal and surplus of abandoned property, or surplus and abandoned property. On this, it adds the section or the general public. If we want to sell it, we can include the general public if there's a private buyer who wants to buy it. And then additionally, the big change here is matching the dollar value. So currently, as it sits, a department head could buy a fleet vehicle for $60,000, but if they want to sell that vehicle because it's more than $10,000, they'd have to bring it to council. So we were just saying match it with the department head. If the department head has a $100,000 signature authority and they buy a vehicle, like thinking about an ambulance or a fire truck, rather than have to bring the sale of that to council, they can just sell it as long as the value doesn't exceed their signing authority.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, this is one I think that's worth diving into a little bit, and it kind of yeah, there's an operational element, but it also goes to policy. I mean, there might be a surplus vehicle or a vehicle that we want that timed out because it hit its 60,000 miles and it's time to get a new truck. But you know, this council might decide, hey, you know, we're happy that you brought that forward to us because maybe we want to donate that vehicle to Green Springs Fire. Maybe we want to send it to Guanajuato. Maybe we want to do something with it. And so I think some mechanism that allows council to have that flagged to us in case we decide, hey, maybe we don't want to just sell this vehicle. Maybe there is another purpose for it that fits a policy objective of ours. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but that's the only thing that kind of came to my mind. It's like, hey, I don't want to just be selling, you know, vehicles left and right when maybe we have a use for it in some other way.
Yeah, you may run into issues because you have to go through the process of, you know, properly disposing of it. So like, to use your example, like you can't just pick a charity at random and donate to them.
Right.
Like there's a,
But we've donated in the past. I mean,
Yeah,
we've
there's-
donated
So-
fire trucks, we've donated.
yeah, I mean, and this is more for, I guess, sale. But I guess I take your point.
I don't know what that mechanism is. I'm not like I haven't really thought this one through. I'm just thinking how are we aware that this is happening so that maybe we can think of a better use that fits our policy objectives.
Councilor Hanson.
Yeah, I think that's curious, Councilor Bloom. It seems like in the past, the only times I've seen that, it's always been at staff direction. So staff has come forward with a plan and council has, you know, agreed to it. So I'm sensitive to that, like in the case of the wrong fit of the single role vehicle that we got, you know, that would have been an interesting case of like, oh, well, maybe we want to do something with that creative. But just from my recollection, it's always been staff driven.
So we have 8 more items under the substantive changes section. We know that they're already going to the working group, so I suggest that we just hear the presentation and then it'll be on the list for the working group to take up. And that will keep us on our timing.
2.62030, it just adds in a succession clause, basically who can declare an emergency in case of something, if for some reason the city manager is unable to act, it would allow someone else to declare an emergency. So all the things that go along with that. It just provides a backup plan, I guess. business license definitions, adding a kitchen or cooking facility definition. This is essentially, as guys, it's come up in code enforcement and code compliance, determining when a space constitutes a separate dwelling. An amendment is also going to have to be made to Chapter 18. We didn't do a lot of Chapter 18 in this section. I think it's going to be a pretty deep dive and involve Director Goldman. But this is one that seems like we could bring forward. I guess there's currently not a definition for that.
Yeah, and that's right. I know Director Goldman has some other stuff that he's working on already, but we wanted to give the council time to get your feet wet on this first.
So that's that one. Okay, nuisances, trees, and hedges. This essentially will allow for the removal of dead trees when they're a fire hazard. It's going to require a determination from the fire marshal, but it'll allow the city to go in and clean things up if it's not getting done. Currently on this one, if it's a nuisance, I don't believe there's a general permission for it. So it's something that Director Goldman wanted to bring forward on this as well. And similarly not similarly, different one, sorry. So this is on heat pumps or mechanical devices. Basically, it's providing an exemption if residential heat pumps get installed and within their 25-year operating life and installed under a new building permit. So we've been having a problem in some of the more closely situated neighborhoods that the heat pumps and air conditionings don't meet, even when they're installed correctly. They don't meet. They're too loud for the threshold. So it's compliance with the noise ordinance is difficult. So this thought would be to provide an exemption because we want to encourage things like heat pumps to be used, and it's going to make it easier as long as they're, again, within their typical duration of 25 years and installed under a building permit and expected and continue to operate as designed. So they're not modifying them, but essentially it's allowing for people to use those devices in close together neighborhoods. Okay, permission to prune. I've kind of put this in a backwards order, but this kind of ties back to the fire danger one. This allows the city to prune back a tree that's blocking the sidewalk or encroaching on this street in a dangerous way. I think previously it had been a process of finding out who owned it, writing them a letter, asking them to do it. If they don't do it, the city does it and we charge them. This will just allow for a city to clear it back to, free up the right of way here.
Counselor Dale.
I hear you. I think, and I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly because I read it and it didn't make sense to me, but I think what you're saying in the approach changes is it allow trees that are on private property that are encroaching onto a public space? Is that what it is? Because I was reading this like, if it's in the public right of way, why are we getting code compliance? But maybe I'm just.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Encroaching, like on private property,
okay.
extending. So the branches come out into the sidewalk, or they've got a dead tree
Sure.
where it's
Understood.
a fire hazard is next to a building or something, there's got
That makes sense.
an issue.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Electric system. So this could have maybe been in table 2, but it's taking out a lot of the language, the prescriptive language in our code and just citing directly to the ESR, which is the Electric Service Requirements Manual, rather than having to change. Again, this stuff changes often. Rather than having to change our ordinances every time something happens in that manual, we just refer people directly to the manual. And I think that'll actually get rid of a lot of the conflict that we currently have, kind of outdated code requirements. Jumping back to trees, it's a lot of codes on trees. So instead of the process I was describing earlier where we drop off a note asking to trim back a tree, this time it's interfering with electric service lines. So if someone's tree is, if there's a power line running through it or something, we can go in and trim it up and not have to deal with the process of asking them to do it and then charging them if they don't. So cleans that up, makes it much simpler. It follows the same right-of-ways permissions that most, cities follow with electric companies, so.
Counselor Dan?
I do have one question on this. Thank you, Jan. And I don't, in general, don't have a problem with this. The only issue, and I'm speaking anecdotally, and this happened in another city once upon a time, is I just came home to a tree that was a stump because it just happened to be on right away and no warning, no nothing, no whatever. So I get the may request to will, but I would think that you maybe just to drop in the suggestion bucket that probably doesn't need to go to a working group is there some sort of like warning? Because as a homeowner, I get that you're going to tell me will.
Yeah.
But like, maybe I just want to call my favorite arborist and give me 30 days or something like that. You see what I'm saying? That's like, I understand it needs to be done to city code, but I just want to make sure that we're not chainsawing things and we didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only comment I would, or point I would highlight is that if it creates a hazard to the electric system.
I completely understand that. That's why that's why I'm completely fine with the will, right? I'm just saying, like, look, if it's imminent life danger and the fire marshal goes, that needs to go because in 24 hours it's going to light the city on fire. Look, I get it. But I think what we're talking about here 90+% of the time is it's been identified. It's not an emergency, but we need to do something about it. And time is of the essence. I think we owe a property owner at least a notice, whatever you want to do, but it still will be will. But I just don't, you just can't not tell a property owner and it just gets done.
I think a notice requirement could easily be put in. I was checking to see if we had our director here, but we don't. But I can ask, I'm sure we can, again, we don't have the language here, so we can put that in, providing notice to a property owner.
Yeah, Counselor Sherrill?
Yeah, that would be awesome too to consider in 13.16.035 as well, to maybe include some language about property owners being able to call and request pruning. And so this is applying to trees that are in the right of way and a plant strip, and that those trees are owned by the property owner. They're required to be put in by the city for development. And a lot of the trees that were put in were before there were required street tree lists. So we planted a lot of trees up until about mid-2000s Urban Forestry Committee that weren't well behaved. So we have a lot of trees that are owned by the property owners that are outside of their surveyed land, but they're responsible for. And the city does their best, the electrical department, to trim them back as they can, sometimes so much so that it kills the tree, and then it's the responsibility of the property owner to replant said tree. So it'd be cool if we're cleaning up the language now to also put language in that gives an avenue for a property owner to request the pruning of a tree. I mean, nobody's going to have better optics of what's going on their frontage maybe than the property owner or maybe the resident or tenant. So I would like to see that. And then I had one other question, if I may, Mayor, in this table on an earlier topic. Is that okay now?
Yeah, but all of these on this section are going to the working group. And we all have the ability to put in any comments directly to Johan that we have concerns about outside of the working group.
I think I'll send you an email on one of these talking about a definition that doesn't exist.
Okay. So, and the other thing to note on your first point, and it did kind of get moved to the back burner, but Director Fleury and I have talked several times about what that would look like, just trees in general. How do we address some of these issues, and coming up with some sort of program with Public Works to help essentially respond to occupants. Hey, I think this tree is a hazard. Hopefully people not calling in other neighbors' trees, but essentially we have been talking about a process, what that looks like, how the city can be, in touch with people and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Go ahead.
And if I may, just just for a thank you to the city, there's currently an undocumented process to do that. Not to call in your neighbor's tree, but to call in and say, hey, I have a hazard tree that's growing into your line. Can you send somebody out? And the electrical department does take those as time allows. So they're already doing a good job. It's just not outlined in a process.
Great.
Yeah, and this would be expanding, or not this particular one, but some of these would be expanding not just with the electrical right-of-way, but with fire danger and disease. So that's the other thing that's come up is disease trees. People don't want it to spread.
Go ahead.
Got one more. Location of meters, again, this just references consulting the ESR, so it provides the ability for people to just reference contacting the electric department and also referencing the ESR for location of the meters. Again, prevents us having to bring a bunch of stuff back. Questions? We kind of did questions as moving along, so that's great.
So thank you first. This work of going back through our ordinances and just the code is important. We've seen tonight that there are still some areas of the charter that haven't been updated yet in relation to the change of government, and I know that puts us in a tricky place operationally for implementing what the voters have put in place. So it's good that we're moving this and making it efficient, making sure people understand things. The direction, I'm just going to recap the direction. Did you need something, Councilor Bloom, because we're running short on time? The council direction is that there will be that Johan will put out a call for working group folks, take up to 3 of them. And the items that will be on that list are what was on table 3, plus 3.08, 2.08, 2.04.020, and 2.28. That sound right? Any concerns with that? Councilor Sherrill?
Can you please repeat that, Mayor?
Sure. The items that will be on the agenda for the working group is everything that was on table 3, plus 3.08, 2.08, 2.04.020, and 2.28.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Can I just-
Councilor Bloom.
I just want to say thank you really quick for putting this together. The team, because I absolutely can empathize, as you can tell by my stack of papers. But it's actually kind of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's impressive that, there's
Yeah.
so much that needs to get done. But like I said, this is going to be the first session, and I look forward to working with a group of you guys on this, because it's important, and people look to this stuff, so it's good to have it, especially without typos. But
Yeah. Thanks again, Legal. You guys are rock stars. Really appreciate it.
Okay, moving on to the second agenda item. Sabrina?
We have a public speaker for this item.
For this item?
Yes.
Right, yes, for this new item.
No, for code.
Oh, they're under 2A.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't have them before we made the direction. Okay, we have Joseph Peck and Susan Peck have both signed up to speak to us tonight. The way that you will do that is by coming up to this microphone here. There is a light display alongside it. As long as it says green, you are still in good shape. When it turns to yellow, you have 20 seconds left, and when it's red, your time is up. You'll have 3 minutes to present to the council. Please start with your name and the city in which you reside.
Hello,
And
everyone.
go ahead and pull that down. You can pull that microphone to make
Can you
it
hear
comfortable.
me?
Yes, we can.
Very
Thank you.
good. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Susan Peck. My husband is Joseph Peck. We live in the city limits. We'd like to make a recommendation for an amendment to the municipal code. 9.08170, nuisances, unnecessary noise, general provisions B, 2, and 3, cite how noises in a residential area may cause, quote, unreasonable disruption when its occurrence is, quote, unusual in time. Also cited in this ordinance is unreasonably loud animal noises under D2 as a violation. D9 cites noises in residential areas between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. which disturb the quiet of reasonable persons with ordinary sensitivities. In another ordinance, 9.16.070, nuisance/dogs, public nuisances, general provision, A8 notes, excessive barking as a public nuisance unless the barking is caused by presence of cats or predatory animals. The time of day is not noted in this provision, allowing for the dog to excessively make noises, which would include the middle of the night when most citizens sleep. Case in point, 1042 last night. Our recommendation is to amend 9.16.170, Section A8, to note that while it is understood the typical behavior of a dog is to bark at a cat or predator, we believe the verbiage, quote, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., as noted in D9 of 9.08.170, should also be applied here, so there would be no ongoing barking to disturb the peace and comfort of the residential area when most citizens sleep. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Joseph Peck?
I'm Joseph Peck. We've been residing in Ashland for 31 years. I just want to reiterate the code there seems unbalanced to me. We've experienced several nights, last night, for example, of little or no sleep because unfortunately we've been have a neighbor who seems to think it's okay for this dog to continue barking as long as it's barking at something. And we've been told by the police department there's nothing they can do, and it's unless that code is changed, and it's extremely frustrating for us, as you might well imagine. That's all I've got.
Thank you. So now we move on to the second agenda item. Sabrina?
All right. Tonight, we're going to do an overview of the prohibited camping enforcement ordinance. Chief O'Mara is here to walk us through some of the data. So I will hand it over for his presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Ty O'Mara, Police Chief. And I will gladly take us through the slide deck and pause for any questions. I think that most of the information is in there. And as you saw from a back and forth earlier today, I know that there are additional questions, and I'm happy to bring whatever information anybody wants. I just need to wait until I fill that position so I can make sure I'm getting the right information to you. Okay. So as an overview, as of January of 2024, our municipal code on prohibited camping was brought into compliance with the new state law that was in place at that time. And also, as I understand it and recollect, it was designed to be in compliance with the federal ruling out of Grants Pass, whichever way that went. And of course, that case was that ruling was not upheld by the Supreme Court. So in a nutshell, under our current ordinance, camping in public spaces is prohibited anywhere in the city if the city has designated a space where people can camp, which the city has with the lawn just on the other side of that wall. If that were not the case, if we did not have a designated camping area, camping would be allowed in public spaces except sidewalks, et cetera, parks with recreation equipment, an enhanced law enforcement area, 250 feet of a school, shelter, or freeway, 150 feet of another campsite, or 100 yards of a river, et cetera. If that were the case, and again, this is not the situation right now because we do have a designated camping area. GIS has prepared this map that all of the grayed out areas are areas that would fall into one of those categories right there. And the purple areas represent city-owned property that would not fall into one of these categories. So if we did not have the camping lawn, purple is where people would be allowed to camp. We do have the camping lawn, so they cannot camp anywhere else in the city in public spaces. Since this new ordinance went into effect in January of 24 through July 31st of this year, and that's just when I started working on this a few months ago, so it's not exactly up to date. 178 prohibited camping enforcement actions have been taken. Of that, 25 are misdemeanors. As a review on that, the new ordinance has it that the first 2 enforcement actions are violation level offenses. Anything above that is treated as a misdemeanor, which can be handled through a citation in lieu of arrest or being taken into custody and lodged at the jail. This map indicates all of the 178, and you'll see that about half of them are out here in this physical space. And just to touch on that a little bit, because I know it sounds a little bit antithetical to have prohibited camping violations in the designated camping area, but the fact is, the city says you can camp here between 7 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. These are the rules. In the wintertime hours, we let them set up their tents a little bit earlier at 4:30 because, of course, it's dark by 5 o'clock, so that's how it is now. Outside of that allowance and that framework, it's just as illegal to camp in that public space as it is anywhere else. So we've had a lot of people, obviously, that are not following the framework set up by the city. They're not following the rules, the timeframes and whatnot, and so they get tickets just as if they were camped in the front yard of Lithia Park. Of those 178, 25 have been misdemeanor level offenses, and I just wanted to get into the 12 misdemeanor offenses back here a little bit. These are the circumstances leading up to the 12 misdemeanor enforcement actions. Tent left overtime, camping in an area around the building not designated, et cetera. So that's there for council consumption and public consumption if anybody wants to understand why the misdemeanor level enforcement has been happening out here. And again, just to drive home the point, the law and the allowance is for people to camp out there between 7 and 7:30, 4:30 and 7:30 winter hours. Other than that, it's just as illegal as pitching a tent on the plaza. And with that, I'm happy. Oh, this is Johan's piece. This is Carmel's piece, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, so to backtrack a little bit, and especially for our new council, those who are new to the council, for a long time, this was litigated in a case called Johnson v. Grants Pass, and that was recently overturned by the Supreme Court. The issue for that was whether or not a claimant could use the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause as a way to enforce, as a way you could sue municipalities under federal constitutional grounds. That was overturned in the last slew of sessions, or I guess 2 sessions ago. And so the default now is that it goes to a reasonableness test under House Bill 3115. The tricky part with reasonable tests is it really comes down to a factual determination. And so how these suits are coming into play are really if a city is providing, well, let me just focus maybe what I'm about to say is the most closest example for the night lawn scenario is actually Grants Pass, even after the Johnson case was overturned. And some of the factors there was that the Grants Pass had a few different designated spots, kind of in a similar model to Ashland, and it abruptly closed, I think, its main largest camp. And the claimants, through the Disability Rights Organization, a lot of their claims were like, well, there aren't toilet services, there wasn't a ramp going to the spot, the abrupt closure was too much of a burden, and so the nature of that claim kind of had an American with Disabilities rights claim. So that's how it came forward. And so the reasonableness, where I got to this statement, is looking at the reasonableness. And in comparison to the Grants Pass case, even after Johnson was overturned, and in comparison to some of the district court's opinion in Medford, some of the things that the court looked for reasonableness in Medford was also, what is the city doing to provide, like, in evaluating its spectrum for how it addresses houselessness in a city. And one thing that the court found commendable for Medford was that it had a number of continuum of care efforts, and the city was putting a lot of effort towards it. And so part of my comparison for how Ashland compares to examples of where it's been litigated has been, I've compared it to like Medford and Grants Pass, and I think Ashland is doing those efforts of, like we just did our shelter. The council had just approved some shelter upgrades. I know we have a really strong working group with the committee on, excuse me, I'm forgetting the name. I know Councilor Bloom is on it, and I believe Councilor Kaplan. So I think continuing those efforts, and then also really taking into consideration if there are any ADA claims. And then I think the other part for our city to consider is maintaining a clean space of the night lawn, and also that there's safety within designated areas. And so having law enforcement also respond to complaints or aggressiveness that can also happen in between amongst those who are on the lawn is also an important factor in its reasonableness.
Thank you. We've had 2 people sign up to speak this evening, so I'd like to take their testimony now. Linda Adams and Debbie Nicewander, you will talk with us the same way that other folks have this evening at the microphone. You'll each have 3 minutes. And remember that you have at the 22nd point, when your light turns to yellow, you'll also hear a chime, and then another chime at red when your time is done. We'll start with Linda Adams.
Good evening, Council and everybody else. I'm Linda Adams. I live on Oak Street. The policies and subsequent ordinances that this and former councils have established, the complex illegal camping buffers, the exclusionary ELEA zones, and the confusing dusk to dawn or night lawn restrictions, have placed the Ashland Police Department and our officers themselves in an impossible, morally untenable position. We watch as Chief O'Meara is tasked with creating and presenting data, often meticulously cobbled together, that aims to satisfy legal requirements and demonstrates where human beings are being ticketed for sleeping. So what does this data actually measure? It measures enforcement. It measures displacement. It measures the criminalization of human survival. When an officer is forced to rouse a person seeking shelter, issue a citation for a minor infraction, or expel them from a public area, they are operating in direct conflict with the police department's foundational mission to protect and to serve. Our officers are not being allowed to be community health and safety guardians. They are being required to be on the front line enforcers of poverty. Furthermore, this framework is a profound moral failure when measured against the city's own stated value, belonging through mutual respect and openness, inclusion, and equity. The intentional inconsistency and complexity of these ordinances may be legally sound, but they are utterly inaccessible to the person struggling to survive the night. By creating a patchwork of rules, we ensure that our unhoused neighbors will fail. By using minor infractions, acts of survival, to create a permanent criminal record, we actively sabotage their path to housing, stability, and employment. The data presented tonight only validates that the policy is working to remove people, not rehabilitate them. A policy that consistently results in expulsions and arrests is not an effective tool for a caring city. It is an expensive revolving door mechanism that entrenches destitution while simultaneously compromising the ethical mission of our own police department. It is time to stop measuring success by how many people we can push out of the city limits and start measuring it by how many lives we have helped stabilize. We must change the policy, not blame the police for enforcing laws that are fundamentally inhumane. It is up to this council to step up to see that we are true to the values that we profess. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Nicewander?
Yeah. Hello. My name is Debbie Nicewander, and I'm a little confused, but hey, I'm going to go with it anyway. On September 15th study session, there was 3 requirements that staff was to bring to council. One was the data on police calls on the night lawn. We got a prohibited camping report. So it's still incomplete. There's no data on expulsions. And I just want to say the chief keeps saying these ordinances are complaint driven. And I don't see how and who's complaining about the night lawn and the folks taking too much time in the morning. So I'd like some validation on that. And prohibited camping, hey, sleeping is not bad behavior. And so I've been racking my brain trying to figure out how we even came up with these rules on the night lawn. And I went over the prohibited camping ordinance, and under 10.46.20, Part D, the city manager has the authority to establish additional administrative rules regarding time, place, and manner regulations as deemed necessary to address particular situations arising from conditions affecting involuntary homeless individuals. And these rules are intended to safeguard the safety, health, and welfare of both the general public and those in involuntary homelessness. So, is that where these rules came from? And I think maybe we should talk to the manager about making some changes, because we have people with mental health issues, with mobility, disability issues. It's really difficult drying their gear before they store it in the morning. And obviously, we're putting a lot of police hours to this, and we're criminalizing the homeless. So I hope we can revisit that somehow. So again, I've been asking for changes, and I'm going to go with my own change. I'd like to request no movement on weekends and holidays, and allow folks to be able to dry their tents and tarps. And with these prohibited camping ordinance, I said it before, it's entrapment, and I'm going to say it again. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The map. It would be nice to have a detailed map. I thought part of what we were doing tonight was addressing alternatives because of the overflow situation. I don't see that here tonight, and this map is just over the top. So I don't know how you all sleep at night. Thank you.
Thank you. So further questions of staff, and we are right at 7. We would need some motion to extend. Council Kaplan?
Move to extend to, what, 7:30?
Is there a second? I need, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we'll carry on. Any additional questions of Councilor Bloom?
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Chief, and putting this together. I know it's a little overdue, but I think there was some miscommunication in what the actual direction was in the amendment originally. I think Housing Human Services was supposed to pick this up. But kind of getting at the data here, so it's 178 total citations. Of those, 25 are misdemeanors. So that's about 14% if my math is correct. Is that right? About 14% of total citations ended up being misdemeanors. Now, 48% based on the map. So the map of the 12, if you could go back to that, is that just at the night lawn, or is that kind of night lawn and Garfield, like surrounding the night lawn?
This is, thank you, Counselor. This indicates 12 enforcement misdemeanors at the night lawn, 2 near AFR 1, it looks like, 4 near the plaza, and then each one of those red dots is another single one.
Single one.
Right.
So a lot of that's concentrated around the night lawn. And then if you kind of go back to your examples of what's going on. So essentially, based on my math too, we're looking at 48% of the misdemeanors all came from this area, the one area where we actually allow camping. But the issue is that we have rules. And so this isn't necessarily about people not having a place to go. It's about individuals not following the rules that have been established. Is that correct?
I think that.
So what I'm taking away from this, and you could speak to this obviously and for your officers, is that it seems like there's great lengths going not to be excessive about this. When we look at 14% of all these violations being misdemeanors, there's a lot of leeway being given to folks that are kind of outside of the one designated area where we say, hey, there's some rules here and we're allowing this. Is that a fair assessment of what the officers are doing out on the streets?
I think it is, Counselor. And as I've said before, my experience in the 15 years here, and as I said before, as soon as I started working patrol here, I've always been very impressed with the number of opportunities people are given to comply without any enforcement action being taken. And without saying that it's an absolute, I'm very confident in saying that the vast majority of the time before somebody gets a ticket like this, they are given ample opportunity to comply with the framework that the community has set up. And only after they have repeatedly failed to do so, only at that point is enforcement action taken.
Quick follow-up? Yeah, and there was a statistic you've given before that just overall, not talking about camping or anything like that, but for APD, it's, what is it, less than 50% of enforcement results in, or of contact results in some kind of enforcement action. Is that correct?
Yes, and a little bit less than 50% of enforcement interactions last time I looked, and every time I have looked, a little bit less than 50% resulted in some sort of enforcement action. A little bit more than 50% resulted in attempting to get compliance through education.
And so in saying that, this 48% number here that we're seeing both in violations and in misdemeanors of those violations that escalated to misdemeanors is actually consistent with enforcement by APD of the overall community, not any specific group.
I'm not quite following the question there, but again, I do think that all of these numbers reflect a foundational attitude that we try to get people to go along with the rules before enforcement is taken. Yes, thank you.
Councilor Hanson.
Yeah, Chief, I appreciate the data that we are getting, and I would love to see more. And this is, a continued piece of work here. So we're working on it, and I appreciate your efforts. Could you go to that map that shows us where thou shall and thou shall not? It's got the purple in it. Great. I think this brings up some questions for me. Oftentimes when I'm walking out within the city limits in the woods, I see camps up in kind of this area above the park. So for that area, if somebody were to call with concern about, camping related, fire, whatever, would that call go to APD, and then would that show up on your dashboard, and would it show up on this map? Are we getting absolutely no reports of folks camping up in the watershed, like up above the new water treatment plant site? This is going somewhere.
Okay. That data is, of course, available. It gets more and more tricky. Once the call is made to ECSO, assuming it starts with our consolidated dispatch center, if that's how it starts, that area is outside the city. So it would be assigned to either a sheriff's department or a sheriff's deputy, or if it is U.S. forestry land, it might go to a U.S. forestry department law enforcement. So depending on where it lands, if it lands anywhere within the Jackson County APD realm, then I can track it because we share a database, but it's not going to come to us unless somebody specifically pushes it to us. Another way that that data could be collected is the fire department uses thermal imaging to find fires, especially at the beginning of fire season. And Chris Chambers will say, hey, we got a camper out here, so we'll trek out into the woods with Chris or somebody else to address that. But I mean, we can get that data. It's just not as easily available. It's not as easy to cobble together. And it doesn't come in as readily because that often escapes anybody's attention, as where somebody camping on the plaza, again, as an example, gets everyone's attention. But if you're clever and you're hiding in the woods, you can very easily get away with it.
So if you are camping up by the trail called Wasabi, or by the old gun range up at the ferry ponds on Ashland Creek, or at the new water treatment plant, that's within the city limits. No?
No, not right off the top of my head. I don't think it is. Is it? I don't think the water treatment plant's in the city limits. I don't think it is. I think that the city limits end at Glenview Drive.
Oh, good, curious. Well, this is why I'm asking.
If I can, as an example, and I said that this stuff ends up with the sheriff's department unless somebody pushes it toward us. And the water treatment plant and the gate that leads from, kind of where the swimming reservoir is to going up the road to the water treatment plant, I know for a fact that road is not inside the city. And the reason I know that is because years ago, I happened to be looking at the pending calls for dispatch, and I saw that there was a call of vandalism to the lock that locks that door, and it had been pending for like 48 hours. And I called dispatch and I said, why is a call pending for somebody seemingly trying to break into our water system and get up to that restricted road? And they said, well, that road is outside the city. So that call is pending for a sheriff's deputy who is assigned to work the forested areas. And I said, all right, we need to take that, and anything involving that road or the water treatment plant, that needs to be designated that it comes to us.
Right.
Just like Willow Wind comes to us, even though it's outside the city,
Right.
and a few other places. So I don't think that the old gravel pit gun range is inside the city. And I'm confident that the new water treatment plant is not inside the city.
Okay. Well, I ask because we don't see any data from your report up in the hills, but we know there's campers up there. And whether it's county land that is within these lines here, or whether it's BLM or Forest Service, I'm just going to propose an idea. One of the things we've talked about the night lawn that's so unique and also, I think, positive for us is that it's an island of land with city buildings and city services around it. So the neighborhood is this is our neighborhood, right? So we can manage our population here with city staff and volunteers, and it's got its own little boundary, and it's also got its own size, right? We can't grow it. It's not getting any bigger. But perhaps if we want to look at another site for a population of folks that don't have a house, that don't like sleeping in the night lawn, we're looking at another location. I'm curious if the water treatment plant area might be a place that we want to annex and bring in and have another site, another camping site, all twofold, to have alternatives for the population that doesn't want to be at the night lawn but wants a safe, secure place, and also to give folks who are camping up in the hills an alternative to come down and have a safe place to camp and do some of the activities that might be really dangerous, like cooking, for instance, in the middle of summer. So even though the data is not here and the question of city limits isn't clean as I was hoping it was going to be, I still want to put this to this council and this community that, the nice things, I know not everything's nice about the night lawn, but some of the things that are nice about the night lawn, the safety and the community that surrounds it to insulate us from the rest of the general public, we might be able to find that at another site, and it might be more towards the hills where we can pull people out of the hills and get them into a central location.
Councillor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. Great suggestion, Counselor. Okay, so what was I going to ask you?
I don't know.
So my question is, it's going to kind of allude back to what was mentioned earlier. Two things, I'll be quick. One is looking at that map that you showed us, and most of the violations are on the night lawn. And knowing that from my experience being on the night lawn, in the morning, it is rough. And I look at the hours, and at 7:30, everybody's got to be gone, up, packed, everything put away. In the morning, people get up, they're grabbing their coffee, they're grabbing their food, and at the same time, in this short time frame, and when I go there, I'm like, I don't know, dragging myself out of the bed at 6 in the morning, but people are in a hurry. And I look at the residents on the night lawn. Some people move faster than other people. Some people, that's just the way of life. Some people are older. And my question is, I know in the wintertime, the time changes because it's dark at 5 o'clock. I think that's awesome. However, looking at time to leave in the winter, I'm grateful that it's when it's raining and snowing, people can stay. But I was thinking maybe if this body might consider extending that time, and I know it's not on you, Chief, but on this body to maybe consider extending that time, even if it's to 8 o'clock, because people are running around, gathering their stuff up. The police officers are very kind, and I appreciate that because I've witnessed it myself. And I have also witnessed people trying to hurry up and scurry and scatter and eat and get all their stuff together. And it's true, it's raining, things don't dry. If I have one tent, that's my home, and it mildews, then I'm SOL. And so I'm hoping that I will bring this up with my colleagues, but my question to you is, I will bring that up with my colleagues, the question to see if we can get that on the agenda, and maybe even what Councilor Hanson brought up, we can get on the agenda if two of us get together. And so my quick question to you, though, do you think that would be helpful, Chief?
In a word, no. Yes, 7:30 is the clear out time, but it's not, I usually get to work at about 9, and I'm still I still see people coming off the lawn.
And I've been here and I've seen people still kind of lingering also, but in my experience, the majority of the people are scurrying around doing the best they can to get their things gone, and people might be eating in the area where the food is. And so I get it, but I'm still going to see if I can bring it up. So one thing I had to ask you really quick, I see on here parks and rec equipment, that's off limits. So it's my understanding that an unhoused person cannot go to the bathroom in the park, is that right?
No.
If they
Cannot go to the bathroom? I must have misheard, I'm sorry.
So what times do the bathrooms close in the park?
I think it's midnight off the top of my head.
No, so in winter, they close around 5.
Okay.
Exactly, they close at 5.
But
So
to your, if this was your question, unhoused person has unless they've been expelled for some reason, they have every right to use the park as much as anybody else does, including its facilities.
So if someone has been expelled and they cannot go to the bathroom, that's kind of,
Well, people usually, not always, but usually get expelled from specific locations.
okay.
And I would certainly take your point that, you know, if we are, there are also publicly available restroom facilities
Outside the
that,
area.
like on the,
Okay.
by Alice Peel Walkway and whatnot, there's porta potties right out there. So I might disagree that we're completely
get you.
taking away somebody's ability to go to the bathroom.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Counselor Kaplan.
Thanks, Mayor. So I've got a few questions, if that's okay. I'll start with thanks. I submitted a few questions earlier today to you, Chief, and 3 of the 4 questions you said you didn't have the ability, that you were happy to do it, but you didn't have the ability at this point because you don't have a data analyst. So I'd just like to put them out there so that folks know that we're asking for this question. I'd like to ask after we talk if this council would like to provide direction to collect that information and give you the time to provide that. So the first one was, because this aggregated data over 18 months, I don't find particularly useful because I can't tell anything about what's going on over time. Is this getting worse? Is it getting better? Is it, almost all of the dozen or so anecdotes that you provided in your other slide about what happened on the night lawn, almost all of them were within the first 6 months of this ordinance being passed. So I don't know what's going on now. I just need to in order to really do a good job of understanding what's working, what's not working, what changes need to be done, I need to have a little bit more disaggregated data. So the first one is, could you please prepare for us information on citations, misdemeanors, and cite violations by quarter? It doesn't have to be monthly. Quarter is fine, but just give us a time series. The second question was for, all the anecdotes that you provided to us suggest that they're for prohibited camping, but they're not really for people sleeping in a tent or staying overnight. They seem to mostly be just occupying the space. And there's in the ordinance, there's a distinction between camping and prohibited occupancy. So I'd like to know, of these in all these different places, how much of that is camping, which is having bedding material or cooking material, versus actually just occupying a space, which is also subject to a violation. The third is how many separate individuals there were of the 178 citations. Was it, and how many violations did each of the top 5 individuals? Are we talking about a situation that's mostly dominated by a few people, or is it 778 different individuals? And then you answered the last question, which is the same question for misdemeanors. You said that actually it's 21 separate individuals, not 20, up to 25. There are 21 separate individuals. So I'd just like to ask that if the council agrees that you provide that information to us at the earliest possible time. And I understand that that's subject to getting your data analyst. I have a couple of other questions, if I may, Mayor.
Well, let's stop there and see if there's council direction. Does that seem like data that you would all like to see? Yes. Okay. All right. So you've got that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay. My next area of questions, it has to do with, maybe you could advance, and this was something that Carmel was speaking to. One more there. This last sentence, if the night lawn is at capacity, Ashland may partner with neighboring cities for houseless services, provided such efforts to connect individuals with outside assistance is reasonable. So this, as I understood Carmel's explanation here, this says that if our night lawn is at capacity, then as long as the police are trying to find space for an individual who's outside of that night lawn because they can't sleep on that night lawn, it's not available. As long as they're collaborating with other cities, then they shouldn't be getting a citation for sleep. if they're collaborating with other cities, then they can cite them for sleeping in Garfield Park or someplace else, or one of those purple areas.
Essentially, yes. And more specifically, and I apologize if I'm going down a road you didn't intend to, but the city is not obligated to provide inside Ashland corporate limits overflow and still enforce camping in other parts of the city, because we can rely on the reasonably proximate neighboring cities like Medford, that they're close enough that people can use their services.
Okay, so we've had this discussion before,
Yes.
and you've talked about it, and I understand that that's your view and the advice from the legal department. My question is, because I have asked in Medford about, do they actually have space? So it seems to me that if they're full, and in fact, the last time I heard from Rogue Retreat, their waiting list was in the hundreds. I guess that doesn't seem like it's necessarily available. And it seems like there's another check that our officers would need to make, which is to actually confirm that there's space available somewhere else before citing somebody here. Do they actually then check with somebody if they find somebody that's sleeping in one of those purple areas? Or do they just assume that because Medford's within 15 miles that they may be able to find a space there without confirming that it's fact the case?
Well, it's theoretical at this point, because while the night lawn has had moments of fullness, as far as I know, we've never lacked space there. So that's been a, what would we do if we legitimately did not have space for another camper out here? But to my knowledge, we've never actually encountered that, so it's a non-issue.
Sorry, Chief, but that's exactly the point. Because the last time we talked about this, which was just a couple of months ago, I was asking about this, is this lawn full or is it not full? And it was getting pretty full, and that's why this issue came up, was, well, where do people go if the lawn is full? So, yeah, it may not have happened just yet, but I hardly think it's entirely theoretical, like when we see their occupancy being more and more.
I would have to check with the city attorney's office to see what steps we would actually have to take to make that an enforceable violation, or if it were a third offense misdemeanor. So I don't know, and I don't know if Johan's prepared to answer that, if that's
okay.
something that would have to happen
I
in a moment.
don't want to take up time right now with it. I would like to get an answer, though, to that question subsequently that we can share with the public.
Okay, yes.
Okay. And then the other question, I want to take up what Councilor Duquesne talked about with expulsion from parks. We've heard a couple times in public forum that, and I've looked in our code, and it is possible for city code enforcement officials or parks officials or peace officers to expel somebody on site for some sort of misbehavior in a park from any and all parks. You said earlier, which I appreciate, it's not, I was going to ask for that information, so I would like to get information to corroborate your sense that people don't get, in fact, expelled from all parks. They just get expelled from one park.
Yeah, and for clarification, there are instances of people getting blanket expulsions based on the circumstances, but there are more instances of people being expelled from specific parks. And I'm happy to talk about anything, Councilor Kaplan, but I do want to be clear, park expulsion and expulsions in general and prohibited camping enforcement are two completely different things.
Right, I understand. And so I appreciate that. I would also like to take you up on your offer to gather that, provide some of that information on park expulsions, whether it is really, if it is rare that somebody is expelled from all parks, because I think it does raise some questions about access to bathrooms if somebody is expelled from all parks.
Yes, sir.
So is that something that the rest of the council is interested in receiving? Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, I'm certainly interested in receiving that information. I just would like to caution us that if we do go down the route of changing that to being similar to the ELIA, that we should make sure that the Parks Commission weighs in on this, since it is their territory, if you will. That they say that they manage and control parks, well, then they should participate in this conversation about expulsion as well.
100%. I wasn't actually suggesting a change at this point, just information.
Okay. Counselor Duquesne?
Thank you, Mayor. Quickly, to piggyback on Councilor Kaplan mentioning if the nightline were to overflow, I believe in the ordinance, it says that the city manager has the right to find other locations for our unhoused community. Is that correct? Thank you.
But to close off on that loop, the city manager has the authority to designate additional camping spaces, but if none are so designated, then parking or enforcement in other parts of the city is still enforceable.
And so I have a question that kind of follows up behind that, because in the instance where we don't have somewhere for them to go, that's when the map comes into play.
No, thank you, Mayor. I guess that means I'm done for the day. This map only is applicable if this designated camping area does not exist. If the city chose to say, we're not telling you where you can sleep. We are not offering that allowance that you can sleep anywhere. We're not getting into that business. Then this map would come into play because a different section of the code would be in play. As long as we have a designated camping area, that section of the code is not applicable in this map, but for informational purposes.
So somebody, one of our officers finds somebody who's camping. There's no space on the night lawn. There's no space in Medford. There's no space anywhere. What do we tell them they can do?
Well,
and is that the operational piece that you're working on?
That's pursuant to the conversation that Officer Kaplan just brought up. That's something that we're going to have to figure out what the requisite steps are between finding that person, realizing there's no services, and reaching a decision on enforcement. And that's a bridge we have not crossed yet because we just haven't been presented with that situation.
Right.
But we will.
Yeah, I think figuring it out ahead of time so that our officers understand what they should do in that situation and don't find themselves stuck at 10 o'clock at night with somebody who's in a tent and has nowhere to go. Councilor Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I just want to make sure I'm reading the math, speaking of data, and putting this in context. So I'll ask you to kind of check my math, my calculation, if you wouldn't mind. So how many, on average, what would you say the number of people are out there on the night lawn per night?
We've been loosely tracking it every morning with a tent count, and it's recently, I think I looked at it, I think I counted maybe like 25 tents tonight,
25?
this morning. And
okay.
I've got that data.
No, that's fine. That's okay. So, and the data you have here, the 98 and the 12, which were the prohibited camping and then the misdemeanor. So that's over 18 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So so if you count it in kind of like, if you look at it in terms of campers' nights, let's just say. So you've got 540 some odd nights, right? A year and a half worth of nights times, we'll call it an average of 25 people out there per night. That's like almost 14,000, we'll say, nights that were camped. And out of those, we've issued 110 camping violations. So I guess what I'm kind of trying to figure out here is we're at 0.89 to 0.91 of violations per nights that were there. Like, I'm trying to find I understand the larger problem, of course. I'm just trying to put these numbers in context.
I actually think it's a really interesting way to look at the enforcement numbers. And one thing that I'm not clear on, and at some point in the future, maybe I'll have a conversation with Debbie to see if she can help me understand, is it really one person to a 10 or 2 or 3? And I think that would be a really interesting thing to explore.
So we are at time. Thank you, Chief, for your time this evening. I think having some of that temporal data will help us understand, because we know that over those 18 months, we've made a number of changes to improve the experience and to help people move along. OVR's helping. There's a variety of things that have changed. And it would be great for us to understand if that has changed, if we're starting to see that number go down because we have more compliance, or if it's rising, or what's happening to it, because I think that gives us an indication of where else we might put our focus and attention. So with that, we are at 7:30. Meeting is adjourned.